Hello.
Hello.
Hi, what's your name?
My name is Tuấn Minh.
I'm going to ask you a question and you will have 1 minute to make any notes that you'd like that might be able to help you answer your question. And you're expected to speak for approximately 2 minutes. So here's your paper.
Thank you.
And your question is, can you describe a book that you have recently read?
I have read many books in my life, but one really stand out and stick with me even till this day. And it is a book called God Gives Happiness. A long time ago, there was a king named Guru Das, and he lived in his palace, and he cared deeply for his citizens. The king had a very close minister that directly works for him, and his name is Raghu. One day, the king was cleaning his sword with a piece of cloth, and unfortunately, the sword has cut one of his fingers off. And when he was screaming in pain, his minister rushed to him and said that if anything happens, it happens for goodness. And the king felt really offended by that, so he had ordered to lock his minister away in the dungeons. One day, he was going hunting with his men, and when his men took another path, he found himself alone in the thick forest. And then some tribesmen captured him in a net, and they are planning to sacrifice him for their goddess. And when one tribesman spotted that the king was missing a finger, they reported it back to their tribe leader, and the leader has ordered to release the king. And when the king was out of the forest, he recalled his minister's words that if anything happens, it happens for goodness. So he felt really guilty about it, and as soon as he get back to his palace, he had ordered to let his minister go. When I finished this story, I have felt every bit of goodness in everything that happened in my life.
Okay. I want to ask you a few more generalized questions about reading. So, do you think that children need to learn to read at a very young age?
I think that it is not quite important for children in a young age to learn how to read, especially pre-elementary school. Because I think it is not needed then, and parents could go with options like reading books to them. And if you do want your children to read in a young age, I think you should get books that are more colorful and have more image than words, so it could captivate them and make them passionate about reading. Otherwise, if you force them to learn how to read, they will just stay away from it when they grow older and are capable of reading.
What do you think is the difference between reading novels and watching movies?
I think in story-wise, it is not very different from reading a novel and watching a film. And I think watching movies will only have a problem if the directors have some twists and changes to the author's original book, and it could be very satisfying and very bad experience. It can give novels readers a very bad experience. And I think the biggest problems about movie adaptation of novels is that when you read a novel, you can imagine and picture the author's own word for yourself. And when something is telling you that it is beautiful, then you will thought of it as something that you feel is beautiful. While on the films, you can only see the books through the eyes of the directors and how he visualizes it, not you.
What's the difference between the reading habits of young people and old people?
I think things that people usually point out when they think of a difference between reading habits or groups are reading speed and types of books that they usually read. But I think those things can change very differently, quite depends on their background, their job and their religions and etc. And I think the difference is only just biased things that we made up on our mind. Because in my eyes, an 80-year-old lady can read the latest installment of Dr. Seuss as normally as a kindergarten kid reading a scientific book about the universe.
Okay, and the final question. How do you think children can be encouraged to read more?
I think the parents have a very great role here. Since they live around their children usually for their first 18 years of life. So the parents can be a role model for them. And when the children see their parents usually reading books, they will come up and ask like, what are you doing? And if their parents answer that I'm reading books, it will create an impression on them that, oh, my parents is reading book. So it could create a habit for them that it's generated from the early ages. And it will encourage them more to read. And parents can also read books for their offspring in pre-elementary state, because by then they usually don't know how to read. And if their parents read it to them, I think it will stick to them more, and they usually will remember it as a nighttime story.
Okay, fantastic, mate. Really, really well done. Right, that's it.
Okay.